Hey everyone, I'm Kevin, and this is the In My Head podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode. I'm really excited for this one, but before we jump into it, these are ways that you can support our podcast if you would like to. If you're watching this on YouTube or not, you can go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, like, share it. If you're only listening, then on whatever platform you're on, you can give us a 5-star rating, write us a review. This increases searchability. When people are searching things on mental health, our podcast will pop up, making these resources available to more people. We're available on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we actually just started a Facebook group. It's a private group, so you have to ask to be to join, but we created this private group as a place for people to come and have open conversations, free of judgment. People can share the things they're struggling with, their success stories of mental health. And it's really small, and we want to grow it. We want it to be a place where people can talk about things openly and not be afraid to share certain things. And so check that out. In My Head podcast. It's a private group. You can ask to join. We'd love to have you. Have more people the better, discussing mental health openly. Another way you can support our podcast is becoming a monthly donor at patreon.com/In My Head podcast. You can donate as little as $1 a month, and 100% of your donation will go to supporting this podcast and helping us streamline our process, make it so we can do an episode every week, hopefully get to a point where we can just do that every single week, and hopefully in the future we can do more than an episode a week. But we take that money and we use that to hopefully, we've already used the money we've received from awesome donors that we have. We've used it to purchase equipment that helps us streamline this process. It's cut my editing time down easily in half. It's made it so much quicker for me to put out an episode, but we still need help hiring people to help us with editing, filming, to really take that load off so we can spend the time researching, finding new guests, and getting new people on the episode, or on the podcast to do more episodes rather. And so in patreon.com/In My Head podcast, we'd really appreciate you becoming a monthly donor and supporting us no matter what the donation amount is. The next thing, if you're into CBD products, you can go to this link. It's a link to CBD MD. And if you purchase products through this link, a portion of your sales goes to supporting this podcast. I'm a big proponent of CBD. I've talked about it a lot of times. This is a great company, and this is a way you can get products, CBD products, as well as supporting the podcast. So thank you ahead of time for that. Another thing is betterhelp.com/In My Head. We don't receive any money from BetterHelp. We're just really pumped on what they do, and they like our podcast. They're offering our listeners a free week of online therapy. And I've ranted about therapy so many times on this podcast. I think everyone should try it out. And this is your perfect opportunity. You don't have to spend any money. Go to betterhelp.com/In My Head. Get a free week of online therapy. You can cancel at any time. You can change your therapist at any time. So check that out. This episode, let's jump into it. I'm excited. It's with Chad Brown, and him and his partner Drew have started something called Epic Man Trips. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's men's retreat trips, and they go do all these different things. I won't tell you the whole story because Chad goes into it and talks about it, his experience with Drew and how they came together. They used to be videographers together. Then they ended up starting this together. Chad acts as Chad is I don't know. We were talking about life coaches, but he's life coach, business coach. He has all these different arms that he does. So that's his responsibility with these Epic Man Trips. And Drew plans out all the adventure part of it, the logistics of it. And so they bring these group of guys together. They do these Epic Man Trips. This last one that they just had, they did motorcycle riding. They did cooking. They're hanging out. They're at a cabin. And so the whole purpose of this is bringing men together in a world where men have to be masculine. They have to shut up about their problems. They can't be emotional. They can't be blah, blah, blah. All these stereotypes that we expect men to be. And they kind of break through all those. On night one, they dig into the things that people are struggling with there. And so people come on these trips to be able to have these open conversations. And Chad says something that I really like. He talks about all of us are vulnerable people. So we don't say, oh, they're being vulnerable. We're saying that people are always vulnerable, but we put guards up to block our vulnerability. And so he says these guys come in and they bring drop their guard and they have these open conversations and there's these great breakthroughs, but then they do monthly calls after that to hold themselves accountable and continue to put into practice the things they learned at these retreats. So I could talk about this all day. I'm all about mental health in general, but because I'm a man, I know the statistics that men are 3 to 4 times more likely to take their own life by suicide than women. So there's obviously a problem going on here where men are having a hard time opening up about the things they're struggling with. And that's what they're trying to cure. That's what they're trying to benefit men by doing, is have open conversations. And then those people can take that, apply that with their spouses, with their children, with their work, with religion, whatever it has to do, whatever aspect they're looking to better their lives in, they can apply these skills throughout their lives. And they've had a lot of success stories, and I'm excited to share the things we talked about with you on this podcast. So please welcome Chad Brown to the podcast.
In My Head is a free-form discussion podcast where we talk about issues of mental and physical health and well-being. This is not meant to be a diagnosis or treatment plan, but rather a place to share real stories and insights from professionals and people who have or are battling mental illness. We hope to create a community where people feel comfortable and happy with who they are. Hopefully this is helpful for you, and please share it with others. Thanks for listening.
All right, so 3, 2, 1. What up, Chad? How's it going?
Hey, Kevin. How are you, man?
Good. Doing good. Dude, I'm not going to pretend we did this perfect. I totally botched the recording, and so we got to do a take 2, but luckily it was only a few minutes in. So, dude, what's up, Chad? How you doing?
I'm great. I know I saw that little red record light pop on my end, and I was like, oh, I bet I've done that before plenty of times.
I know. I've got like 3 recording devices going on. I always forget about that Zoom one. So here we go, dude. What's going on, man? Tell me a bit about your background, and we kind of got into a little bit of where you were growing up, your culture, and all that. So if you don't mind sharing that again, it's the first time for listeners. So here we go.
Yeah, no problem. If I can say at the top again, too, just how grateful I am to be in this space. I mean, this is such a near and dear topic to my heart. And really what I've dedicated most of my life to is the mental health, the brotherhood of men, creating lives that they're proud of, creating legacies. What we say is creating a legacy that you're proud of. And so I think mental health is such a big part of that. And it's an honor. I'm humbled to be here, that you would invite me into this space, and so grateful you're creating the space. So thank you, man.
No, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man. It sounds like you guys got so much going on and lots of different endeavors and branches. And just last night you were like, oh yeah, I had a podcast on this. And yeah, I had a podcast on this. I was like, dang, he's crushing it, man. And I love that. It's really motivating to someone like me to just see people getting after it. I told you about after our phone call, I just get those like bursts of energy, and we'll hit on that today, man, is how do you get those bursts of energies when you're like motivated, and how do you take that into tomorrow? Because I think that's where it's really hard. But could you give me a quick, however long you want to take, a background of yourself? Like, I love your story of kind of the culture you came from and what led you to do this focus on men's mental, physical, financial health, relationship, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I have a lot in common, but I grew up in Utah, which is obviously heavily LDS culture and faith. I grew up in the LDS faith. So that is the context of how I grew up. It colors everything. For those of you who are deep into some sort of faith or dogma that really puts its tentacles into every single aspect of your life. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but just like it really, I don't want to say dictates, but it influences or colors how you look at every aspect of your life. Right. And so that's really the context of which I grew up. Then when I became a teenager, I decided to experiment a bit with girls and drugs. And, that's very counterculture to the Mormon way. And, really
there was girls and drugs, but the question is, was there rock and roll in there as well?
there absolutely was rock and roll. If it was Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Pearl Jam, then I was in.
Nice.
So, and if I could get all 3 of them in at the same time, then we're really rolling. But so that was interesting to have that rebellious, it was really formative for me to have that rebellious time and to navigate and explore a little bit with a very immature mind. And then there's this thing in the LDS culture, the LDS faith, called a mission, where, when you turn 18, 19, you can choose to pay for yourself to go for 2 years away from your family, knock on doors, talk to people about the gospel, teach them, baptize them, all of that sort of stuff. And about 18 and a half, I decided that I wanted to go at 19. And I actually didn't decide at that point. I kind of always thought that I would go. And, the mission is an interesting, because it's so formative for me, because I see it as like a rite of passage in the culture to manhood. Every religious dogma culture has some sort of rites of passage. They're like earmarks or milestones on becoming a man, quote unquote, becoming a man. And this is definitely one of them culturally. And it is set up to where it's going to affect you for the rest of your life, depending on how faithful you are, where you're going to find yourself in leadership roles in the church, all of that kind of stuff. So it was huge. It was a huge, huge deal. In fact, it was the very first time that I had an anxiety attack. Was just a week after I turned in, call it turning in our papers, but that's, you have to go and get all these doctor appointments and make sure that you're not in legal trouble and all of that kind of stuff. And so you fill out this extensive paperwork, and then you turn it in, and that's when it goes to the church. Yeah, and you're worthy. You get ecclesiastical appointments or interviews where you get really, at least I did. Not everybody has the same experience, but I got very, very drilled on every aspect of my life, sexuality, drug use, all of that kind of stuff. And we talked in very, very fine detail about everything in my life to make sure that I was deemed worthy to take this adventure. And so I just wanted to earmark that, and we can come back to it if we want to. But yeah, that's the first time I felt anxiety in my life, to the point where it was uncontrollable at times. And I had just never, other than drugs, I had never felt the influence of something that I felt that out of control with. Right. So did the 2 years, and just learned some incredible things about myself, about the world, about communication. Man, when you're out there every single day, knocking on doors with people, opening, swearing at you, yelling at you, slamming the door, calling you all sorts of things, you can't help but develop some gravitas, right? Like some ability to let it bounce off of you. And so I'm super grateful for that experience, to be able to experience the world in that way, because it created a lot of, what's the word? Not vitality, but it created a lot of resilience for me. Right. And resilience is this word and this idea that has come back to me now in full force, which I think is so incredibly important. I look at the world through a frame of resilience now. And that's been a really powerful thing. So, coming home off the mission, my now wife, I knew for a couple of years before the mission, and then we were engaged 2 weeks after the mission, and then married 6 weeks after the mission.
Woo! Getting it done.
And we were both 21, young, stupid, infatuated. And I just, everything that we've gone through, we've had 3 kids now, faith transition out of the LDS faith, all of these things, I'm just astonished at and I feel so lucky that we are in a space where we still choose each other every day. And we choose to learn to love each other every day and learn about each other every day. And then, that's something we could also talk about. I have some very, very strong ideas about what it takes to create a marriage that works. And we're practicing it. I would not say we're perfect, but we're definitely willing to practice, and that's what I think it takes.
Yeah.
And so married young, we were married for 1.5 years before we were pregnant with our first kid. And it's been kids up the line since then. We have 3. And now our oldest is 14, our youngest is 7, our middle is 11. Girl, boy.
Nice.
And early on I grew up in construction. My dad taught me everything about construction, residential construction. I grew up scrapping drywall for him. He hung drywall my whole life. Well, not my whole life, but my whole childhood, and worked his ass off. Him and I didn't have much of a relationship because he would work so hard, and then he would come home and kind of sequester himself with sports and, kind of, I don't want to judge it too much, but numb out a bit,
right.
and we didn't do a lot together. We, luckily we got to go on family camping trips and that kind of stuff, but work became the way that we related to each other. And working hard. And I learned a lot of things about working hard from him. And so I hung drywall through high school, came home from my mission, worked construction. That led me into real estate. And I started acquiring real estate at about 2008.
Yeah.
So, and those of you who lived through it and were adults at the time, you're going to know where this is, or you could probably guess where this is going. If you start acquiring real estate properties in 2008, the beginning of 2009 hits and you're devastated. And that's what happened to me. We were holding, both personally and with investors, we were holding about 30 different properties. And we had bought all of them at a premium because, 2008, everything was expensive. It was moving. Banks were lending on everything, and everything was overvalued in a bubble. And so I think pretty much overnight, at least the way that I remember it, we woke up the next morning and nothing was selling. The values were through the floor. The dollar was terrible. People were losing their jobs. It was like, it was going so fast that it was hard for me to even grasp what was happening. And that's the second time that I had a really, significant battle with my mental health. Yeah. And dropped into a deep depression. That was the first time I experienced, not feeling motivated to do something. Right. It was the first time in my life that I could sit in my office of a house that the bank was trying to take from us. Somebody new was knocking on the door every single day trying to get us out of the house. And I could sit in my office for 8-9 hours, not do a damn thing, staring, crying, whatever it was. And there was so much I made up about myself in that experience. And man, so that's another mental health earmark for me. And then I decided I was never going to do anything for money again, meaning that wasn't the main motivator, because I didn't love real estate. It was just money, right? I saw a lot of money in it, and I thought money was my goal. I wanted to have money. I wanted to have status. All of these things were really what were motivating me. And I could be super honest about that now. And I recognize it. Like, I wanted to be seen as successful, rich, smart, all of those sort of things. And I thought the money was what was going to make it happen. And that's why I got into real estate. So I decided I would never do that again. I've always been a creative person, loved filmmaking in high school. I was the, president of the filmmaking club, and I did all the filmmaking courses. It was awesome. It was a way to not take hard classes and, all of that stuff. So I decided that I was going to jump into filmmaking again. And so I actually found a friend from the mission, and his name's Drew. What's up, Drew? You might listen to this.
Shout out to Drew Renner.
He was filmmaking in Southern California for weddings, and it blew my mind what he was doing. Like, I didn't even know you could do that sort of thing. And technology for this sort of stuff was on the brink, and it was incredible. That was 11 years ago, and stuff was moving so fast, and it was getting really creative and cinematic and all this stuff. So we packed up our family in our Scion XB. So if you know what a Scion XB is, it's teeny tiny. We packed up everything that we could take in that, 2 kids at the time, and we drove to Southern California to start this film filmmaking business as well, filmmaking business. And we did that for 6 years together, closer to 4 years together. I took over the business. Drew not bailed in a bad way, but had some other things that he wanted to take on. And it was time. But in that process, I'm getting there. I'm getting to why we're talking today. So in that process, we worked so hard. We worked our asses off. I did in life what was displayed to me by my dad. And that was work hard, numb out. And it was causing so much pain in my marriage. And my wife, I mean, we weren't making very much at the time, and we're in Southern California. So she's in this teeny tiny house for half of it, teeny tiny apartment for the second half of it, with two really young kids, just doing everything she can to be a mom, and not many friends, nobody to talk to. I'm gone. It got to the point where the business got so successful that we were traveling all the time. So literally back-to-back flights. I'm telling you, like, we would get home in the morning from one job, go home, shower, repack, and get on a flight the next night for another job. And it was, and I really carried this kind of attitude of like, well, I'm taking care of the bills, and so you need to just take care of the home.
Yeah.
And
and we talked about this a bit too, like, and I hope it doesn't come across like we're disparaging any like religious culture or anything like that, but coming from the background, there is a sense of like, the man provides, the woman stays at home and takes care of the kids. And so there is kind of that set up precedent, and you can easily fall into that. Like, I'm doing my job, I'm working, I'm making money. So you can fall into that really, I don't want to use the word toxic, but just this like unhelpful mindset of like, you need to be doing this, 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 and this. And there are some, whatever, it happens on both sides, but sometimes men can fit into that thing. Like, I can't be bothered by that stuff from home, like I don't need to help with this, this, and this because I'm doing this. And I'm not saying that's what you are doing, but it tends to happen when you fall into this. Well, these are the roles we're in, and we can never cross over. You know what I mean? So
well, that's exactly, and I absolutely did that. That's what I'm saying is like, it was a contractual agreement almost.
Yeah.
To the point of where roles were so defined that I would make Katie wrong, bad, or broken if I didn't think she was doing it the way I thought she should do it.
Right.
And wasn't, and really she's experiencing her own mental health crisis because she doesn't have other friends or adults to hang out with. And, that those things that are those connections that are so important outside of the home, she didn't have any of that. And I don't know, it was a really, really difficult time. And I did not give her any space to have like mental health needs. And it was really, really ugly. I mean, really bad. And my kids didn't see me very much, like such formative times. And, she'll admit now that because of the circumstances, she would allow her temper to be really short with the girls. And that really affected our relationship with them in some pretty formative years. And we're doing work now, very open and transparent work now with them to heal some of that. Mm-hmm. But it absolutely affected them. And so, what happened was, we had one of these quick turnovers from a trip onto another work trip. We got to the studio. I pulled up our bank account just to check on everything, and somebody had hacked into our bank account and had spent a bunch of money, our business bank account, and it broke me. It was another time in my life that I can identify where just mental health was not good. My marriage was in a rough space. I felt like a shitty dad.
You can say whatever you want, dude. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I felt like because there's no other word for me to describe it, as what I felt was just such a shitty dad, like such a pile. And, because of where I had put my priorities, and it broke me. And I remember we were in the studio and I was crying and talking to Drew, and, one thing that Drew and I always had was this level of realness with each other, and this commitment to each other's well-being, I think. And so that night we decided, hey, if we can't turn this thing around in 6 months, we're out. We'll close the doors and we'll walk away. And at this point, we were doing some significant work, like from the outside. Our clients were Volkswagen, Target, Pixar Animation Studios. We were doing film work for all of these kind of really cool brands that were paying us a lot of money to go all over the world to do these things. And it was, from the outside, it was just like this beautiful thing. From the inside, it was hell. Mm-hmm. And so we decided at this point, 6 months, we better figure this thing out in 6 months or we're out. Because this is not sustainable. It's going to ruin our marriages. Our kids are going to hate us. And, what else is there if we don't have those things? And so we got real intentional about it and happened to find a business coach. And his name's Adrian Kaler. And he came in and we hired him as a business coach to help us organize, because we thought the business was the problem, right? We need to figure out how to organize this thing, set better contracts, all of those things. We blamed it on the business. If the business was in better order, then our lives would be less chaotic and we would be less busy. We would work less. We would be more connected to our wives and our kids. Oh boy, did we find out that was not the case, and that the business was just a product of our thinking. Right. So Adrian came in as a business coach, but ended up being an everything coach for us. Through our work with him, our intense work with him, I became the dad that I dreamed of being. I became the husband that I really wanted to be for Katie. We made really difficult decisions for our business. We both moved out of California because that was draining us, the traffic, the expense, but we made up the idea that we had to be there. But through our work with Adrian, we realized we could go somewhere else. We could do what we wanted to do. So we moved away, and then that worked for about 1.5 years. And then we came to a very amicable agreement that our partnership was no longer working. And so I bought him out of the business or took over the business, and he went and did what he had been dreaming of. And, all of these beautiful things started to happen in our lives. And that was about the time when we separated as partners. That was about the time that I realized actually what I wanted to be doing was what Adrian does. Right. That was the most creative, relational thing I had ever seen. And it had created such incredible results in my life, that it was no question for me that's what was next for me. Right. So I started understudying with him, and started coaching a lot of other filmmakers, actually, because I had a substantial reputation in the industry, and started offering the opportunity to coach with me in the industry. And that went really, really well for about 4 years, and coached a lot of photographers and filmmakers, creatives that were in the same sort of battle that we had just kind of gotten ourselves out of. Mm-hmm. And so incredible clients that created a lot of results in their life. And then I decided, I wanted to go full time. So I joined up with Adrian and my other mentor, Dan Tacchini. They're partners in a group called Take New Ground. And we mostly work with corporations and executives, C-suites, that kind of stuff, to help them formulate both a culture in the company that they want, but also, within themselves, and create results with their wives, with their kids, with their business, and create a vision that's, a future worth having for them. So that's my main work now is with TNG. And then I've just loved working with men so much, and the roles that men tend to take in our society. And they're so powerful, but we've been lied to about them for so long, for generations, that we've been lied about what the role of a man is in our society. Right. That it's, that's where epic man trips came from. That's where simple epic actions comes from. We can talk about those later. But really, I have a heart for men that are willing and wanting something more.
Yeah. Beautiful story, dude. I love that. And thank you so much for sharing. I think it's super necessary, man, because here's for me, like life coach and business coach, like that just seems to be insanely common that a lot of people are doing. You don't know always what background they're coming from and this and that. And I'm not saying it's not helpful for anybody, but I love knowing your background, because when someone comes to you and they're like, dude, I'm just living in this shell of myself. I don't feel like I'm not being the dad I want to be, the husband. I kind of am sitting in those moments where I'm like, something needs to change, but I'm too scared to make a change. And then someone like you comes in and can bring your history of what you've been through, whether it's religious, marital, business, financial, feeling like you are pretty set in the real estate world and then it crashing and like all these things. You want to know that there's someone you can be real with and they're giving real feedback, but it's going to be, I love that you went to this Adrian guy and you're like, okay, dude, like, do our contracts just need to be better? He's like, no, dude, you need to check yourself. And you're like, oh, freak, like I've told this story on here of going to the therapist and was like airing out some stuff about like, and I've totally talked to like my in-laws about this, like went in and almost was like venting about things about, just certain conversations and stuff, and expecting to go into the therapist and them just being like, you're right, you are the victim here, like blah, 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 and completely turning that on its head and being like, hey, I think you and I talked about this too. It's like, hey, like conversations and people aren't hierarchical. We're all on the same plane. We're just in different, you talked about this like latitudinally, or like we're just in different spaces, but we're not piled up on top of each other in this order. So stop viewing conversations that way and stop viewing people that way. And everybody has a form of therapy, whether it's talking about things that they're really struggling with in their family unit or whatever. And I kind of left just like, whoa, like I remember calling my wife and just being like, hey, sorry. like, like I had a completely different view of how this was all playing out. And I just assumed I was kind of in the right on it. And so man, people that bring that level of understanding and education, and you seem to me like, just the few times we've chatted, you seem like the kind of person that's really digging into issues, and like, you're not kind of just like, well, here's the magic bullet for everybody. You just need to be doing this better. It's like, dude, everyone brings their own biases, traditions, wherever they grew up. There's so many factors that play into that. So it's probably rad to be able to dig into what someone's struggling with and figure out the core issues going on there.
There's so much there that you just said that I want to address just a couple of things.
Address it all.
This hierarchical thing is something that we deal with so much, especially in corporations, because that's how they've traditionally been set up, right? And so our idea is, anytime we go into a culture, is the goal is to come out on the other end at a lateral leadership model rather than a hierarchical leadership model. And the reason for that is that everybody leads at one time or another in any organization, right? And so to think that a leader, like, because they have a title, cannot learn from somebody who has a lower title that is what creates toxic culture in a business,
right?
In a corporation. And it's the same thing in our families, right? If I, as dad, my title dad, cannot learn from my kids or from my wife, which is what I used to think, honestly. I'll be super honest on this in this conversation. I that's one of my values, is like, I know early on in my marriage, for the first 12 years, I didn't think there was much that I could learn from my wife. Yeah. I mean, I thought that we were here, I was the leader, and she was to learn from the things that I'll just say it, man. Receive revelation for our family, right? Right. And that she is to...
You take revelation from God, and she follows you as you're following God. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was toxic. It created a very toxic culture within our family. And I don't even know if most people think about their culture, their family. Here's the other thing that I'll talk about, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Is I'm a super judgmental person. I'm incredibly judgmental.
Yeah.
And judgment is a result of hierarchical thinking, right? So when I meet somebody, when I meet you, Kevin, what I'm doing naturally, I think it's evolution psychology. I really subscribe to evolutionary psychology model, where we've lived for millions of years and we inherit some of the psychological traits from previous our previous generations, right? And these things, so fears and our fight or flight system is all an evolutionary and psychological or physical and psychological inheritance from our ancestors that ran from tigers.
Right.
And so what I'm doing is, on a very regular basis, is that I am judging whether or not you are above or below me.
Right.
And that is going to determine the way that I interact with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you're above me, I'm going to retreat and I'm going to find every fault in you. I'm going to judge the way that you interact with me with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, it's to the point now where it's a joke between me and my wife. Like when we come away from some social experience or something and I start, and then we just start laughing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there it is again. Right. And if you're below me, I'm now thinking, okay, what is it? How can I influence them? What can I teach them? What can I, all of that kind of stuff. How are they being stupid? How are they? Now this has been this has been a practice for me over the last couple of years of recognizing when I discovered this. And in fact, if people want a book that has just profoundly changed my life, it's The Courage to Be Disliked. And they talk about this principle of hierarchical relationships and why they don't work, and they create toxicity and discontent. So I would, if you're interested, if this conversation interests you, check that book out. It transformed everything.
Can you remind me who wrote that? That's not Jonathan Haidt, is it? Who wrote?
No, it's not. It's actually, keep it right here because it's my fave. It's kind of odd. It's Ikiro.
Yep, there you go.
Kashimi.
Perfect.
If you're watching on video, you can see that. The Courage to Be Disliked. It's a Japanese, I believe it's a Japanese author.
Just a vintage camera falling. No big deal.
Don't worry about that.
Well, dude, if I could speak to that, is like there was years of, so speaking of people that go through mental health issues, when it comes to depression, you tend to view everybody as better than you. And I slipped into that for a long time, and that affected my business. My wife was constantly like, dude, your confidence level, like you put out videos, because I'm videographer, that's what we have in common, doing video work. I had a hard time even accepting a compliment. This video is great, Kevin. I was like, it kind of sucks. Like, I wish I would have done better. I wish I would have done this. And that's normal, I think, especially in the creative world, as you're always your worst critic. But even simple compliments of like, I like your shirt, I would be like, oh yeah, I like yours. Yours is better. Like, I wish I had that. I wish I had those shoes. Or I was so uncomfortable taking a compliment. I viewed everyone as better than me. Mm-hmm. And so that was like retraining of myself. But I struggle with that as well, dude. The judgment. And I think my wife and I talk about this all the time, man, is there's certain things we don't realize about ourselves. But once you can see that, there's so much power in that. It doesn't mean that thing magically goes away. It just means when you can acknowledge it, it's just how it is. There's things I do around the house where we just joke. Like, I have in my mind, like, I do this and this is the right way to do it. And then my wife will be like, well, there's this and this. And I'll have these light bulbs pop on sometimes where I'm like, I didn't even know I did that. Or I will make excuses why it's not that way. But then I finally have that breaking moment where I'm like, damn it. Like, that is. And I think there's power in finally realizing that,
That's right. And in my work, I always say, we don't change.
Yeah. Okay.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
We don't change. It's true. There are some things, so many of my clients come to me and they say, I want to change. I don't like this about me. I don't like this about me. I want to change this. I want to change that. And for me, it's usually a bit of a shock when I tell them, okay, and this is usually in like the introductory call before they've decided to work with me or not. And I just tell them, you're not going to change. So if that's the goal, our work together is nothing. Like it's for nothing. I wouldn't even, but if you're open to the idea that we don't change, but that those things that you want to change are an invitation for you to show up a different way, then we can get somewhere.
I like that.
Like, I think we have these things for a reason. And that if we were to lose them, like if I were to no longer be judgmental, because what I turn judgment into is an invitation for me to connect. It's like a flag, right? It's like it's putting a stake in the ground. Like when I notice that and noticing is everything. Noticing is 80% of the battle. When I notice that I'm judging another person, like I'll take my neighbors for example. When I notice that I'm peering through my window, watching my neighbor do something and I'm judging them, that is an invitation for me to walk over there and connect with them.
Yeah.
And learn about them, ask them questions, be curious about who they are, what they're about, what their background is, what their dreams and their hopes are, what they're working on, how they're creative, all of that kind of stuff. And once I get connected to that invitation, man, I'll tell you what, like when I transformed this a couple of years ago, I have the most deep I have the deepest relationships and most relationships with other people than I have ever had in my entire life. Yeah. Because it starts with a judgment, and that turns into an invitation. I go connect, and now we're connected. Now the judgment's gone, but thank goodness I had the judgment. Yeah. Because I turned that into an invitation. It's an old Stoic teaching of the obstacle is the way. Right. Right. And I keep this coin is always with me. The obstacle is the way. Yep. The Daily Stoic, because that literally has been the key to connection for me. Right. And so whenever somebody comes to me and is like, hey, I want to change this. Hey, I want to change that. My suggestion to them is stop worshiping change and turn it into an invitation.
Do you feel like there are certain things, because I'm like fully on board with that idea, but I'm thinking of myself, of course, I bring it to myself. And so I'm thinking of ways of thinking that change maybe, or like belief systems, or are you saying there's certain core things about you that are in place and you're just applying them differently to different like situations? Because I think of like, let's just take a religion, for example. You can be in a religious situation, a religious ideology, and you feel so confident that you're correct in your ideology that, well, I don't know, because that goes against what I was thinking. Because I was saying that sometimes there's a point where you're so confident in your ideology that, but maybe it is judgment, that you almost are comfortable with everybody doing what they do because you're like, I know I'm in the right. But then again, maybe you are thinking like they would be better if they were if they were in this, like they almost have it, but if they were in this, they would have it all. So maybe in that sense it is. But then sometimes when people move away from ideologies or a strong religious belief system, they sometimes move into a mindset of just accepting everybody, what their belief system is. Like they don't care anymore what people believe. So, I don't know, sometimes thought processes change, but maybe you're saying at your core, if you're judgmental, that's a part of your core thing. You're just applying it in different situations, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I would say it's core instincts don't change.
Right. Yeah. Right. There you go. Yeah. I like that.
And we can change our circumstances. We can change our beliefs, obviously. Beliefs are a little bit harder to change. I mean, they're usually pretty ingrained. There's a reason that they're a belief. It usually is from years and years of practicing something, right? So practice is an interesting thing to observe because for most religions, dogmas, traditions that I know of, there's some sort of practice set up, because if the practice didn't happen, what would happen to the belief?
Right.
It most likely would diminish, right? If the practice was gone. That's why, whenever we're trying to formulate a belief, or we're working to create some different way of showing up, and that's what we can change. That's the way we show up for people is what we can change. But that's not us.
Right.
That's like our expression of us.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so for me, it's like, I don't want to have the shame conversation. The shame conversation doesn't do anything for anybody. And shame pops up when we should be this way or that way, and we're not.
Right.
And so my formula is, let's get rid of the should. You're exactly the way you should be. Now, maybe it's your interpretation and your expression of how you are that's not working. Let's talk about that.
Right.
How do we create a new expression? How do we create a new way of being, a behavior around who you are that helps you get what you want?
Right. I like that. That's awesome, man. There's a lot of powerful stuff in there. I wish we could do like a 4-hour episode just on like cognitive dissonance or like just But man, I really want to take time to like dig into your I don't know if it's a new venture, because you guys have done a lot of stuff, this epic man trips and things like that. But can you obviously do you consider what you do life coaching? Is that what you call it, or what, like separately from epic man trips, or what do you consider it?
Yeah. We call it coaching, consulting, none of the terms really do it justice. And you mentioned earlier, like the term life coach, I always tell people you should be suspect of anybody calling themselves a life coach. Right. Or a coach. I think so. Anybody should be suspect of me. I think that's healthy. And I want, because my whole work is based on results. Right. I tell people right from the beginning, don't believe me, believe the results we create together. Right. Don't believe me. I don't want anybody to believe me. Yeah. Because if the belief is in me, once I'm gone, the work we did is diminished. Right. It's gone. But if they believe in the results, then they can continue to create the results in their life with or without me, and that's the goal. Right.
I like that. Yeah. So what led you to? It sounds like you had your own like tons of experiences yourself that led to a kind of a. I don't think you told me you chose to focus on men's well-being and all of that. It almost kind of just in its own way went in that direction. You told me you started getting male clients, and it almost seemed to trend that way, which led you to kind of repairing up with Drew and starting this venture of epic man trips. So maybe what led you to, or I don't know, maybe it was spontaneous. What led it going in that direction of focusing on men's well-being and health?
There's men are an interesting, and we're going to talk in generalities here, unfortunately. Because that's the only way to do it. But there's so many variations in any of these ideas. But if I can just speak generally, I think men is probably the largest group of humans that are in pain, but work so hard to not look like they're in pain. Yeah. And that's intriguing to me, because if I actually believe what I presented earlier, the obstacle is the way, is that I believe the pain is the way. Like the pain is an opportunity for us to take a look at who we are and how we're showing up. And so that intrigues me, that there's an entire 50% of the human population, if we're going to group everybody into one thing. But and I get that doesn't work, but for the sake of this conversation, 50% of the population is suffering, but pretending like they're not.
Right. Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah.
And that intrigues me. That, like, the curiosity for me around that is just, it's amazing. And, working with men through the process of recognizing the pain, and that it's okay, and that it's actually okay if other people know you're in pain.
Yeah.
And that suffering is okay. This life, suffering and pain is an essential part of the human experience.
Right.
But to try to hide it, to try to pretend that it doesn't exist, to try to pretend that you're stronger than that, doesn't have to be part of the human experience.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, I mean, I'm sure you with like mental health, psychology, evolutionary psychology, have they pinpointed what that is in men? That, like, I grew up with all sisters, and so I don't know if that's a female trait or a male trait, but I just naturally, it was like, and same with my wife. It's like she has 3 sisters, so there's 4 girls and 1 brother, and so for them it's like, what the hell are you not like, what is wrong? Talk about it. Like, what is the point of carrying it? And so I had that background growing up. When my parents were divorced, I didn't live with my sisters for a long time, so I didn't get that a lot as I got older, but it just seemed to be a male trait, and I luckily grew up with friends that we were very open. We weren't like even when I started this podcast, I kind of had a buddy reach out and was like, dude, you never said this to me. You never told me you were depressed. I was like, in reality, I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't know it was clinical depression. I just thought I was like a moody ass kid, like I just had I was just grumpy a lot, and that was like my dad's thing, because he came from this gnarly background. So it was all like, he would read like I almost said John Wayne Dyer books, Wayne Dyer, all about attitude is everything, and all these sayings that he would have. And so I grew up with that, which was a good thing, but I a lot of times just thought it was a problem with me. Like, maybe I'm just a moody kid, and I'm up and down. As I got older, I'm like, okay, something else is going on here. But what is that about men because now we're diving into men's health. And I just made a post about this the other day, and it's the awful realities that, like, men die by suicide 3 to 4 times more than women. And that's an awful reality. I think every single suicide is an awful reality, but there's something going on where the statistics say more women have mental illness issues, yet more men are taking their lives. And so there's something going on there where they don't feel they're a part of a community where they can openly talk about it. You grew up in construction, so there's a lot of ribbing and a lot of joking, which is healthy, like this healthy camaraderie and stuff. But there's also this men mentality where it's just like, I'm good, dude. Like, it's like, are you okay? Like, dude, you're going through some heavy stuff right now, And you're like, even, dude, there was a time we did the same thing. Like, I was in medical school, I quit and moved to California with no money, started being a videographer. My dad passed away a week later. So moving, death, and a career change all within a month, And so, but yet I had people trying to reach out to me, and I was just so closed off. I was like, I can't, other than my wife, I did not, even my own mother-in-law, who's lost like a sister, a brother, like she lost so many people. I was uncomfortable even just opening up to her. Like, she'd put her arm around me. Are you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good, dude. And I'd go off and just like probably cry by myself, like there is something weird, innate thing in men where we just kind of like, it's strange, and I don't know what it is personally, but
yeah, well, I'm probably the least qualified person in the world to answer this question, but I do read a lot about psychology, and and I listen to a lot, and it fascinates me, and I do like, I don't know if you know who Gad Sad is, but he's an evolutionary psychologist, And I listened to a lot of his stuff, and it seems to me there's so much there, but evolutionarily we were set up because all of the competition was life or death. Like it was literally, will the seed live on, right? Will we be able to reproduce? Will we be able to survive an extinction, really? And everything is written into our DNA from that kind of survival. And so in that kind of survival, competition is high, especially amongst males, because they're the ones out getting the food. They're the ones out fighting the battles. And so there's this posturing that had to happen. If you showed weakness, it was literally the death of your people.
Yeah. That's so heavy, man. So gnarly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is written into our DNA. Like that, epigenetics, I fully follow all of that and believe that we're fighting threats now that no longer exist.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? So we now make up that showing weakness or showing pain or, getting connected, like all of that kind of stuff now looks like we're not going to make the team. We're not going to get the position at work. We're not going to get the promotion. We're not going to get the girl. We're not going to, whatever it is. All of that now shows up as like, it's the same threat applied to things that don't make sense.
Right.
Right. And so we fight to not show weakness, not quote unquote show weakness. And that prevents us from connection, I believe relationship is what will fulfill us. It is the only thing that will fulfill us, is connection with each other. If you think about it, everything in this world, and it's not by accident, is dependent on relationship. If you own a business, what happens if you don't have a relationship or there's no other humans in the world?
Yeah.
You could have the best iPhone. You could invent the best iPhone in the world, right? Or smartphone or whatever it is. And if there's not other humans to relate to and to have buy it, it's nothing. Same thing with love. You could be the most loving person in the world, but if there's not other humans to love on, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just think we are the machinery, the software it's old, it's outdated. It needs an upgrade. Right. And that's what we're doing, is we're upgrading our software. Every time we're willing to get connected to the way that we're disconnecting, that we're putting on a show, we're putting on a front, we call them brackets, all of those things. Like, we work so damn hard to do those things, and ultimately they're causing more suffering. They're making us more depressed, giving us more anxiety. And that's, it's interesting to watch the whole generation of social media, because social media is posturing on steroids. And there's no wonder that suicides and depression and all of that kind of stuff is just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And my message to men, like especially male suicides being so high comparatively in relationship to females, like suicide is the option when you think there are no more options.
Right.
But the thing is like, we have so many resources to help us explore options, but it requires us to let down the defense, deposture, and be okay with who we are. Then the resources flood in, the relationships, then the connection floods in. So literally what we think is keeping us alive, like is our survival, is killing us.
Right.
Either physically or mentally or emotionally.
Right. Yeah, and that's such good stuff. I had to go back and re-listen to a lot of that, dude. I appreciate your insight on that, and I It's something I've thought about a lot and don't get to have like, these are the types of conversations I've wanted to have more on the podcast, because I've even noticed that myself with people reaching out about the podcast. I don't mean to generalize, but women are pumped to come on and talk about mental health. They're pumped to share their experiences, their trials and stuff. And I'll get men that are like, dude, yeah, let's do it. And then I'll get that text or the call and like, I can't, I'm not ready. And I respect that 100%. I was in that boat for years. Like I wish, I literally spent years and years, like no one knew about it besides my family and my wife. I would tell my wife, like, do not tell your family I'm on medication. Don't talk about this. Like, let's just keep it to ourselves. And I know it's like my mental health journey, but I'm married to my wife. So it's also kind of unfair for her mental health in a way, because she's needing to talk to people. She's needing to connect. And where I'm shutting off, man, I got to that point 3 years ago where I'm just like, I'm so... Moving back to Utah is what finally forced me to stop keeping it to myself, because I moved back and started studying more about mental health. And it was seeing place that I grew up having one of the highest rates of opioid use, antidepressant use, which I'm fully on board with as a resource and an option. It's helped me. It's helped a lot of people I know, but people believing that's the only resource too, I also think is a problem. And so realizing the suicide rates, we were in the top 5 states in the country of suicide rates. Teenage suicide rates surpassed car crashes. Like it was so staggering to me. I'm just like, who am I to think that I can keep this to myself anymore? Like it's no longer about me. Like, and I didn't feel alone anymore in a way. I was like, there's so many people struggling that we need to open up. And as soon as I did, people, trickle in, they reach out and they say, hey, like, I'm not ready to speak about this, but I'm grateful that you're giving a voice to it. So literally I read yesterday, I think it's 1 in 5 people struggle with a mental illness. So if you're hanging out with a group of 5 people, statistically, there's a person in there being quiet about it. And so it's something I've been painfully aware of. And, but this idea of men speaking up, I think a lot of power has come in that, of men speaking up and starting to realize like we don't have all the answers. We don't like wake up every single day knowing exactly what, A, B, C, D. We don't have full control over our emotions like we pretend we do. And so these are all great things. And so that led you re-teamed up with Drew, right? Mm-hmm. And started this new venture that is focused on men's health and well-being. So I would love to hear anything and everything about that. I know personally people that have gone on your trips. I'm not going to say their name, even though they wouldn't care, but have reached out to me and were just like, dude, it was awesome. Like, Chad and Drew are awesome dudes. We laughed, we cried, we freaking ripped on motorcycles. So it's very unique in that sense. I would love to hear about that process of maybe starting that, and then a little bit about what happens on these, what happens on these trips. How do people leave feeling uplifted, and how do you keep that momentum going? Because that's always my question is, this happened literally, I mean, no surprise we'd said this before when I wasn't recording, but it is election day. So literally yesterday, my wife and I, we do these kind of weekly business meetings, and we were talking, and we always leave those meetings like, yes, dude, like we're so pumped up, we're fired up, like we've got options, we've got this in the hopper, we're stoked. And then we both woke up, dude, and there was the weird freaking energy when we woke up this morning. And we both were kind of just laying in there in bed, awake, but just laying there. And all of a sudden we were kind of like, we do our thing, like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? Yeah. And then I'm just like, something's weird. And she's like, I know exactly why it's weird. Like it's election day and there's just this weird lack of connection going on right now. Yep. And so it can feel really lonely and scary. And that's just kind of in the air, Yep. And so anyway, there's my rant, but like, I want to hear about this, like connection to people and the success stories you guys are seeing and all that good stuff.
Can I say, going back to what you were talking about before, can I say one thing about vulnerability before I talk about the trip? vulnerability is an interesting thing, and it's such a hot topic right now. It's such a hip thing to talk about being vulnerable. The other thing, interesting enough, that is really hot to talk about right now is quote unquote safe spaces. And feeling safe. And I'm going to say something that probably most people won't like to hear. But I'm committed to speaking what's true for me, at least what I've found to be true for me. And my invitation to people is just to consider it, like just a question, like don't believe me, but just be open to the idea that this might be true. One thing that I work on with my clients all the time is that there's no such thing as safety. Safety is an illusion. And this is hard for somebody to hear, especially if you're struggling with mental health. I know for me, when I'm in an anxiety attack or something like that, all I want is to find some safety. But it doesn't exist. We, by nature, are vulnerable. So this is the other myth that I like to dispel, is that there is no such thing as becoming vulnerable. You are vulnerable. Now, the extent at which you are disconnected from other people in your life is the extent to which you try to hide your vulnerability. If you're working constantly using so much energy to hide the places that you're vulnerable or to hide your vulnerability that already exists, no matter you don't have a vote. You're a human. Your physical life can end tomorrow. Your marriage, if you're in a marriage, if you're in a relationship, it could end tomorrow. Your child could be killed tomorrow. Like, we're vulnerable. We don't have a choice. It's the nature of the human experience. And the extent to which we work and expend energy to hide our vulnerability is the extent to which we are disconnected to other humans.
Yeah.
And it's true for me. And I ask anybody that's listening, just consider it and observe over the next couple of days, what do you do? Like, what lengths? Because I know I go to some pretty extreme lengths at times to hide my vulnerability. And it creates disconnection with my wife and my kids and my partner, my business partners, and my friends. And once we can observe that, then we can start to not be so scared about where it is that we're vulnerable and be willing to let that be seen for who we are. And then connection happens. That's one thing when working with men. Almost every man I work with asks me, why don't I have close friends that I can talk to? 90%, 95% of them. That is the question. We will work on that for months. And this is it. This is the key. If you want connection, you must be willing to show where you're vulnerable. That's just the way it is.
I like that.
So that leads us well into what the adventure is about, what the Epic Man Trips is about. Really, it's our flagship experience, and we've got a bunch of other things that are supporting it that I'm really, really stoked on. That if people can't get involved with us in this level of experience, there's a few other things. So Epic Man Trips is born out of this idea that both the masculine and the vulnerability can exist at the same time. Meaning, we can be masculine. We can go out and rip on dirt bikes and cheer each other on and haze each other and, and work our asses off on adventure. And I mean, this last trip, one of the days, one of our participants came up from sea level, and we were riding at like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 feet. And he got terrible altitude sickness, delirium, and we're in the middle of the mountains, like, at least 8-9 miles in. We got to get him and a motorcycle out of the wilderness, and this camaraderie, this rooting and hollering, and like, we were men, like it was super masculine. But then there's this, it's almost this yin yang, and we think of it as a valley and a mountain. we dive deep, or, the mountain is we climb high with adventure. We get high with adventure. Like it's a climb. That's the masculine part of it. And we dive deep into our vulnerability, like deep, deep into our vulnerability through exercises, through commitment, through staking ourselves on vision. And there's just this, 3-4 days of getting so deeply connected through both the masculine and the vulnerability. And that's why men come away from this experience saying that they've never experienced anything like it, because there are very few spaces in this world where we can go and be both.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And we make up that life, we can't be both. That's why the man puts on the front in his career and all that kind of stuff. But we can create this. And my message to the guys when we're leaving, I do the coaching, Drew takes care of the adventure side of stuff. But my invitation to the guys is like, don't look at this as like a magical space. We didn't do anything magical here. You can create this everywhere else. You can create this in your family, in your company. A lot of the guys that we have come out are business owners, and they're trying to, create a better culture for their business, that kind of stuff. Like you can create it everywhere if you're willing to let both exist at the same time. And that's the essence of epic man trips, man. That's we can be in both at the same time, and nothing's wrong with that. In fact, it's the most beautiful place to be.
Yeah. I love that, man. I'm assuming you get pushback sometimes, like or do like the people coming on the trip, it's almost like they're coming for that purpose, Do you ever get someone that comes back and they're like, I'm not, I don't know, like
So it's an intense application and interview process. So if you want to go, you have to apply on our website. We review your application. If the application looks good, then we will do an interview with you, an hour interview, where we just get really clear on what it is that your purpose is for coming. And there's a lot of clarity that happens in that call. There's a lot of staking claims and creating vision in that call as well. But we're really, really particular about who can come. And who we invite to come. And it just makes for such a great experience because everybody's there on purpose.
Right. People might think like, oh, it's just, 2 days of just ripping in the desert on a motorcycle. So like what do like the times aside from that look like? What are like the evenings like? What's like, because I know a lot goes into this. I had a meeting with your partner Drew, and we talked all about the logistics of it, and so much goes into that, so much preparation and all that for these people to get together and have a positive experience. So what does like the rest of the trip look like? Like where are these obviously the groundbreaking is happening in every little nook, but there's so much more than just the adventure side of it.
Yeah, so my work is all about you guide. So if you're my client, if you're a participant on the trip, you guide your experience. I'm just there to be curious and ask questions and investigate where you might be lying to yourself.
Right.
Right. So I'll tell you, like in one trip, every guy will have a different experience. And that's the nature of the human being as well, right? I mean, that's the way we interpret things and internalize things, and our past informs our present, all that kind of stuff. So, but what it logistically looks like is, so I'll take this last adventure, for example, and each adventure is different, and we do different things. This last adventure was a motorcycle trip in Park City, Utah. And we rented a big cabin where we're all there. It's family style. We have a cook who is making us meals, preps all of our meals and our lunches to go. And, we get there, everybody arrives Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday evening, we lay the groundwork for the conversations and the discussion and the training that we're going to do. So a lot of that is around language, like what kind of language that we use, not like swear words, but language. We manifest our reality through the language that we use, right? So when I work with my clients, I'm listening to hear what kind of words they use to describe their experience so that I can offer alternative options. Right. And so that's what we're doing that first night is I'm getting them, and we do introductions, and introductions is not the normal, hey, my name is blah, 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 and I'm an accountant and da, da, da. No, it's much higher stakes than that. So we go deep right from the beginning on Wednesday night, through a prompt of mine. You follow this, you don't have to do anything on these trips. It's all voluntary, but we've never had somebody not decide to jump in because they're there on purpose. And that's the key to getting the right people. But the introductions are so much more than that on that first night. And that sets the tone for the rest of the trip. And I'm able to gauge how willing people are to get vulnerable or show their vulnerability in that moment. And then I can extend invitations and show them where I think they're holding back and invite them to not hold back, because this is one of the only places in the world that you're going to be able to do this right now. You're going to go out and create it in your life other places, but right now, this is the place to do it. And opportunities pass too. That's right. The other thing. Every decision has death in it. Every decision has death in it. Whether we decide to go for the thing, not go for the thing. Keep going.
I'm just going to check this camera while you're talking. I'm still listening.
Yeah, you're good. So we talked a lot about that kind of stuff in, participation and that kind of stuff the first evening. The next morning we wake up and we do the training from the time we wake up, or from the time we eat breakfast. We have a nice big huge beautiful breakfast from the cook, from the chef, and then we dive into the training until about 1:00, and then our lunches are packed and sitting ready waiting for us. We throw them in our packs and we take off to go to the trailhead where we're going to ride motorcycles that day. And then we repeat that pattern for the next 3 days, or for the next 2 days. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we do it. We throw a big party on Saturday night. And that's, we're barbecuing, we're throwing hatchets. We had this last one, we had a hatchet competition that just got real fast, hatchet throwing. And it was awesome. And, drink some beers, have some really good food, sit underneath the lights and next to the fire and talk and chat. And then the next morning wake up and everybody departs. So it really is a bit of everything.
I love that, man. That's so rad. Here's the thing, I think I've run into personally myself is I'll go through a therapy session, or I'll have for example, a month ago, every single person in the world right now is affected by a pandemic happening, and it's affecting work, relationships, it's affecting everything. So I try to keep that in mind, that I am not unique in this situation, that I'm the only one suffering. But 2 months ago ish, 5 guys I grew up with came down, and I grew up with all of them. They all live in similar areas. So I see them maybe once a year, and they all came down to mountain bike. And it was just something I needed, not for any other reason other than just to almost pretend a pandemic's not happening right now. We're going to mountain bike, we're going to charge, we're going to just have a blast. We were up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. every night, up at 6:30, mountain biking, just full send, And I just felt so rejuvenated. And I am lucky enough to have a group of friends that I always joke with my wife, you can tell how much somebody's your friend by what percentage of yourself you can be around them. So if I can be 40% myself, if I show up and I start talking to a dude and I'm I really need to reel it back because this isn't, we're not talking openly. So it doesn't mean they're not a good person. It's just mean that's the disconnect maybe between us. So I have these friends come down, and we are a very open set of group of friends. And so when they left, I find it's hard for me to keep that, rejuvenation, and part of that is getting 4 hours of sleep 3 nights in a row and charging, so that's expected. But I don't know if you could speak to that at all. I know that you guys do these follow-up calls and stuff like that, but I think the tough thing is having men have these positive experiences, and some of them tend to go back home with resentment that they're not still living that situation, that it's oh, now I got to come back, and I'm a dad and I got all these kids and financial responsibilities, and I just wish I was charging in the mountains again with my friends. So like, how do you carry that positivity with you? So maybe just go there, because obviously it's more than just staying positive. You're having them make huge changes in the way they communicate in family and business and everything. So yeah, maybe if you could speak to that. That's
a couple of things.
And that's a selfish thing too. It's like a struggle of mine to carry this life lesson. And I always say that to my wife, like I'll have these breakthroughs and I'm like, okay, now live that tomorrow. Don't just talk about it today. That's my struggle. You know what I mean?
We've been really, really intentional about this, because I understand that this is something that happens. I experience it when I have attended something that I thought was like magical, right? That I thought was like this almost magical pill to everything that was causing me suffering, right? And the problem with those events is that I think most of them are positioned as something that's going to change your life. And I know that the event is not going to change anybody's life. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to make some brothers, like deep brotherhood relationships that like you've never had before. But we're not in the business of Epic Man Trips. We're not in the business of selling trips, which is so funny because it's contradictory to our name. But we're not selling experiences. We're not selling adventures. We're not selling a trip. We're selling an invitation to create results in your life.
Right.
And we understand that. And so everything in the experience is set up for you to then take what you learn, take the information and the realizations that you've had about yourself and the way that you show up and the language that you use, and take that into your life and create results. And so the men that we have there are excited to get back into life, because they're excited to take these things and now put them to the test, right? And we're not, everything is set up as a practice. Practice is a place to fail, right? And we talk a lot about that on the trip. Practice is a place to fail, because failure brings learning.
Right.
So you're going to take this stuff out, you're going to practice it, and every failure is something to celebrate.
Right.
Every time you go back home and you want to show up with your wife in a different way, and you show up in the old way, yes, that's a success, because if you notice it and if you catch it and are willing to sit with it and observe yourself and your thoughts and what might have created that way of being again, then that's the win. Watching the game tape is the win.
Right.
And there's no shame there. There is no should. There is no like, oh, I went to this thing and I spent this money and I did all this hard work and now I'm just the same old person that I've always been. Yeah, if you choose to be.
Right. Yeah. I love that, dude, because so much, dude, this is what I keep going back to, is like exactly what you just hit on, is like self-analysis, like where's that coming from? Why did I react that way? Like what? I think it's so hard for us to be self-analytical, where it's too easy. Like you talked about the judgment. It's too easy to be like, oh, this is what that person's not doing right. Or that's what they're like, if they just did this, but man, how often are we able to look at ourselves and be like, dude, is some of that happening with myself? Is that, dude, I do that when I lose patience with my kids. Cause growing up, my dad was like, he was tough on us. Like we would get home from school, we'd turn on Saved by the Bell, we'd be watching it. As soon as we heard the garage door open, it was like, go to your rooms. Like we were pretending like we were studying, but then as my dad got older, he completely got into like meditation. He was all about nature and all these good things that he started taking on, settled down as he got older and older. But I noticed with little kids, I'll step into that and I'm like, dude, I did the same thing. Like I was overreactive in a very low stakes situation. Like I didn't need to be that way. And I think it's natural just to be like, well, that's because they did this or this or this, instead of being like, dude, like literally I did it last night, dude. I had in my mind, my wife and I had that same business meeting we were all ramped up about. We were like, let's get the kids to bed. It's daylight savings is gone. So now we can get them to bed. early when it's
Earlier.
dark, and let's take like 2 hours and keep going with these ideas, this business I did. Of course, it's the night, like, I'm pretty sure they were all in bed by 10. And then I come downstairs, my wife's got her laptop out ready. I'm just like, no, dude, like, and it was just like, I kind of just all let it go. And I was like frustrated and a little like bummed about it, that this plan like didn't go to fruition like I thought it would. Instead of just being like, hey, I was just with my kids, like, guys, just close your eyes, like, just go to bed, like, relax. I'm like, there's nothing relaxing about that. When someone's like, close your eyes, go to bed, like, you're not like, okay, like, you're ramped up, and it's like, I know that as well as anybody, but in the moment, you're letting the things you want to get done trump, like, whatever, like, this idea of your night the way it was supposed to be, but the fact that, like, I don't know if this is normal, but I'm a little over analytical, where I think about every little thing I did and I could have done it better. I could have done that better. Even on successes, I'm like, I could have done that better, and so it's a good or bad thing, whatever. But I think I don't know, for me, I don't even know where I was going with that. I think the idea of just being able to be analytical and just like, okay, like, it's all good. This is how I'm going to do better at that next time. Like there's been times I've gone up there and I'm completely calm and I'm like, hey guys, you're not tired? Let's do like a breathing exercise together. Or tell me about your day. What happened today? Like, what did you like? What was hard for you today? Like, we have these rad conversations, and then they relax and go to bed, where I could have spent that exact same amount of time getting pissed, like, and in my mind, like, making them fall asleep, instead having an epic experience with my children that I'll remember. They might be too little to remember, but at least I'll be like, man, that was time well spent with my kids, So.
Yeah, I can relate so deeply to that experience. I mean, it's like at least once or twice a week for me that my kids are not, are interrupting the way that my evening should have gone.
How dare they?
Right? And, anytime we're in a should conversation, it's a shame conversation.
Right.
And it's a breakdown. And we say, all breakdowns come from us from me making me, them, or it wrong, bad, or broken.
Yeah.
Me, them, like the other person, or it, the situation, making it wrong, bad, or broken. And that creates disconnection, that creates discontent, that creates anxiety, all of that kind of stuff. Rather, the opposite of that is, it is what it is.
Right.
Here we are. The phrase that I like to use when I'm mindful enough is, here we are.
Yeah.
Meaning we're here. It is what it is. And if I make them, me, or it wrong, bad, or broken, this thing's going to blow up. Or I can say, none of this is wrong, bad, or broken. It just is what it is. Now what? Right. Now, how do you want to show up? Now what new commitments do you need to make? All of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I celebrate, and you mentioned it. We support these guys on the back end of the trip through monthly calls, and that's where we actually have some accountability for what we're creating in our lives. So every month they're going to come to the group, and they're going to have to account for what they're creating in their life. We're going to ask them questions. It's not easy, man. It's not. We hold each other to what we say we want. Right. And it gets uncomfortable. And guess what? Discomfort is growth. Like, everything that grows goes through some discomfort. Right. And, both being held accountable and holding your peers accountable is uncomfortable, but it's connecting. And, in our work, your word is your bond. We talk a lot about commitments and keeping commitments and the word that you give, because the word is all we have with other humans. That's what creates a relationship, is our word. And so that's a lot of stuff that we work through on the follow-up calls. It's very structured in a way that you're held accountable to the things you say you want and the decisions you're going to make inside of that. And you also report on your failures because we celebrate those as well.
Yeah, I love that because it's not this like, you ever go to those business groups and that's where like a ton of posturing happens. Like, tell us about your business. Well, I got this and this and this. And like inside they're kind of freaking out like, oh dude.
Yep.
And I've been to those business meetings and I feel like I have to like literally make things bigger than they are sometimes. And almost like, I mean, that's the name of the business sometimes, but like I have grown, and I might have to change my vocabulary a little bit because I use that word vulnerable a ton. Like it's refreshing to me to have a conversation with somebody, letting their guard down and maybe showing that vulnerability more. It's so refreshing to me. And I literally tell my wife, like I've grown to appreciate authenticity, and that's another, cliche word or whatever, buzzword, but I've grown to appreciate someone will say something to me like, I don't know. There's some funny ones that probably aren't appropriate for this program, but like, there's things that people say to me where I'm taken back and I'm just like, there's so much gratitude that I'm having that conversation because that person let their guard down and showed me them, which leads me to show more of me and be like, dude, like I was so grateful last week to have a conversation with a buddy of mine that was just like, he came over and we just had a great conversation. He was able to like talk about things and me openly. And as the night went on, we ended up chatting till like midnight and my wife showed up and then the three of us were just having this open conversation about life and difficulties and even just belief systems and marriage and where marriage is tough. And like, just like, I was appreciative that my wife could be present and I could say things without like, what do you mean by that? It's like, dude, yeah, I get it. Like, it's hard. It's hard, like being with you sometimes. It's hard this, but at the same time, like there's other times like we're high-fiving each other, walking past each other in the hallway. And it's like, I've just grown to appreciate when I can be real with somebody and they're real back with me. I feel like you're instant, like, you have this instant connection because of that, because it can be a rare thing today, I think.
That's right. Yeah. And the foundation, that's so true. Like what you're saying, what I hear when you're saying this is the two foundational principles that for our trips and for our work in general is radical openness and radical transparency. Those are the two things that we're committed to in these experiences. Radical openness is the willingness to hear what you least want to hear. Now, I don't mean the sounds coming in. Like, I mean to actually hear it, like to actually consider it.
Right.
That's being radically open to something you may have not seen before or been willing to see. And radical transparency is saying that which you least want to say. What's true, what's real feedback for the other person, like not in a degrading way, not in a judgmental way, but in a, I care for you enough to risk with you and say this thing that I really don't want to say.
Yeah. That's powerful, man. I love that. And so, man, I love this. I feel like this topic I could go on forever. I don't know. I feel like we should do a whole nother episode on like success stories, of like, of these transformational experiences with the men you experience, how it changes their life. Because, and to play devil's advocate, I think let's say someone else could listen to this, because I'll be totally honest with you, dude. A few years ago, I think I heard of my first like men's retreat, and I kind of laughed to myself, just like, oh, that's all we need is like more men doing this, masculine, like, and that's totally me and my background just being like, yeah, that's great, but like,
it sounds like a trip of posturing, doesn't it?
Exactly. And maybe that's why I was like turned off by the idea of it. But like, as I've grown to appreciate openness with mental health issues and stuff, and when I have a genuine conversation with anybody, but specifically a man, because it's so rare, telling me like, dude, I'm struggling with depression. I'm have anxiety, dude. It struggles. And this is what I'm doing. Like, I feel immediately connected to that person. And so what people who may have that same mentality as me hearing this years ago about men trips or whatever is it trickles down to who they are as a person. Because I feel like this is completely anecdotal, but I feel like women are, I'll just say my wife. I won't say women because this could be totally wrong. Like, my wife is so much more patient when I'm acting like a turd before she kind of breaks and is like, all right, dude, you're being an ass, or you're doing this or whatever. She's so much more patient until it gets to that point where men, we tend to just blah, 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 blah. But like, these trips and connecting with people in an authentic way trickles down into the way they communicate with their wife, the way they, or spouse or whatever, the way they communicate with their children. It trickles into their work. And so that's something myself I've changed. The way I've thought about those is the way therapy works. It's not, we tend to think it's selfish. We tend to think it's selfish to go to the gym. We tend to think these things are selfish when it's a mental transition happening that trickles down into their daily life. So you've got to care for yourself to be able to care for those around you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we haven't set up our lives, especially I think in Western culture, we haven't set up our lives in a way that we get to take a good look at ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
It's everything else, right? Everything else is external. Like making money is so just look at the things that we idolize. We idolize products. We idolize money. We idolize houses and cars. And how do we look on the outside? And that's really from the way that we set up our work weeks, that our weekends are all about like getting out with the toys and doing the things. Like, all of these things have set us up in a way that we don't take much time to look at ourselves, to turn inward. We're always looking outward.
Right.
And when we turn inward, then we can that's when we can invest in ourselves enough to make a difference in our lives. We think, I work with so many men that think like, once they make this certain paycheck, once they buy this boat, once they get this house, once they have this job title, once they have this hot wife, all of those things, they think somebody's going to flip a switch and now it's happy.
Wow,
now it's fulfilled.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen. I coach, the majority of the guys that I coach make over $250,000. I mean,
that's great money.
That's great money. And they're so unhappy.
Yeah.
And they have everything, and it just, the epic man trips, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be what we provide. Whatever you can do, find a way to take some time to turn inward. Be with yourself. Do you love yourself? Like, do you love who you are? Do you love what you're creating? Are you proud of the legacy that you're creating? What are people going to remember you for? What are they going to get at the pulpit and say at your memorial service? That's what will bring you fulfillment. That's what will bring you purpose.
Right. All
the other shit just flavors it.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful, man. Oh man, I love that. Is there anything you feel you'd like to add about what you guys are doing and anything? I feel bad keeping you on much longer because we had the recording, whatever you want to call that. But I just want to get, if there's anything else you want to add to Epic Man Trips or what you do as coaching that you feel you need to add. The only thing I would add is if maybe someone's not in a position right now for financial strains or whatever it is to do something like a men's retreat, or maybe that's something in the future that they're not able to make happen right now. Like, for these people feeling like they're stuck or they're just in this and they can't take those steps forward, they feel like they're doing, for every step forward, they're going a few back. Like, what are some things, and I know it's a very broad question, but what are some things they can do in the now, to start making these positive steps to be the better spouse, the better, parent, the better employee or business owner or whatever? Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple answers to this.
Yeah. And it's different for every person, obviously.
It's different for every person, except for I can talk principally about something that I believe is true for everybody. I don't ask anybody to believe me, but just consider it. Every man I talk to, every man I coach and work with or comes on the trip wants something different. Whether that's in their career, whether that's in their relationships, their fatherhood, whatever it is, they want something different. So one of the very first things that I have them do is write down what it is that they want, like pinpoint it. What is it that you think you want? We call that the felt need. That's what they feel they want. It's not always what's actually wanted or needed to get what they want. But that's an aside. I shouldn't have even mentioned that. That's much deeper than I wanted to go there. But write down what you want. Then figure out how to go create that for other people.
Yeah.
If you're wanting love, if you're wanting connection, and I get that these are like really touchy-feely, but just let it sink through your hardcore and get to your soft core. And I think that you'll realize that like this is really what we're looking for. If you want brotherhood, if you want camaraderie, if you want somebody to check in on you, to be concerned about you, whatever that is, figure out how to go create that for other people, and it will come to you.
Yeah.
It's been my personal experience in my life. When I'm down in the dumps, when I want something, when I feel like I don't have a good friend or whatever, I stay stuck. And that colors and influences my interactions with other people in a way that they don't want to be my friend. They don't want to be, I mean, they might want to be my friend, but they don't want to, like, I'm repelling people by wanting so much rather than focusing on what I can give. There's an exercise that we do in our public training called giving and taking. And it's very interesting because you go and you stand before each person in the group. There's usually about 30 people in the group. And they, by saying nothing, not knowing each other, whatever, they look in your eyes and they say giving or taking. And when one person goes through the whole group of 30 people, almost unanimous giving or taking amongst 30 people. It's a presence. It's a energy that you give off if you're giving what you want or if you're taking what you want. So that would be the first thing, and that doesn't cost anything other than some time and some self-reflection that we were talking about. We have a couple of resources that are free for people as well that they can check out. SimpleEpicActions.com. You can go there weekly. We send out an email, and it's a simple single action to start practicing week by week. So you will get a short little email, a little message from me, maybe accompanied by a story that's maybe a paragraph long. I purposely make them very short. I know how busy people are, and we need to practice getting to the point more in all of our work, or I need to practice getting to the point more, so that the message is not lost. But it's a short email you get on a weekly basis with an action that you can implement this week. Like this last week's was do the hard thing first. When you have a to-do list, when you have conversations that you want to have with somebody, do the most difficult thing first. Neurologically, that frees your mind of all the worries and all the stories you run about that difficult thing. It frees your mind to be more connected and creative. So it's just weekly little simple actions that you can take to start to implement some of this into your life. We also have a summit, a men's summit coming up in January that I'm stoked about called Venture. And this is where we explore what it looks like to have a life that we love and create a legacy that we're proud of. And it's going to be 6 to 8 different speakers who are doing this in different areas of life. They come from all different walks, musicians, artists, like just all over the place. And it's 2 days virtual summit. So you watch it from the comfort of your home. You can watch it live or get the recording. And it's going to be just so powerful over 2 days, just such great messages and stories and people who have overcome, figured some things out in life that are true for them, and a lot of invitations to live a different way.
Rad, man. That's awesome. I love how much you guys are doing, man. There's kind of something for everybody, you know, that's like in every walk of life. And I think that's always the question, is somebody hears like a retreat and their first thought is like, oh, I can't justify that, you know?
Yep.
And I've been there too. I've done it a ton of times. I've done it in work and in personal life. I'm like, I can't justify that. That's like too selfish, or that's this, but you don't. And it's kind of funny because I'm married to someone who's like, invest in yourself, invest in your business, invest in this. And it's that mental health thing where I'm like, I can't, you know, or whatever, but just goes back to, it all trickles down into everyday life. So right. Dude, I appreciate you coming on, man. And Chad, I feel like we could do like a 12-hour podcast and cover everything, and we could figure the world out, you know, but I appreciate your time, man. I appreciate all you're doing. And I don't know, from the time I met you and Drew, I just immediately felt the sincerity in what you guys are doing. And I'm really stoked that there's people like you guys out there doing it. And I've talked to people who've specifically been to the trips that you guys have put on, and they've talked about how amazing it is. And so, yeah, so I appreciate what you're doing for everybody out there. And I think there needs to be more of it and more discussions about it. So thank you.
Man, Kevin, thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel super humbled and lucky to be involved with these men's lives who are creating some incredible things based off of some of the things that they picked up and gained while they were on the trips with us. And man, to be a part of that journey with people is like the most lucky I think I could get. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know how else to describe it. I just feel, and I don't know how long it'll last. And so I'm going to cherish every moment and every relationship in it. Yeah. And just feel so grateful to be there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chad, for coming on the show. And let's do another one sometime. Let's, as it gets close to maybe one of your guys' trips, let's like maybe do an episode or after one. You could tell us about that and some of the success stories. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, maybe you should come as like a reporter.
Hey, there we go, man. You know. yeah. Underground journalist, like figured out. Yeah. No, I know. Drew was talking about that, like, possibly some filming or photos and stuff. But I'd be honored just to experience something like that. I think I know it would be extremely positive for me, and I'm glad that it's making a change in a lot of people's lives. So Thanks, man, and we'll talk soon for sure. Thanks, Chad, for being on the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to Chad for taking your time to come onto this podcast. If you want to support our podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're not, check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, like it, share it. If you're only listening to this, then give us, a 5-star rating, a review, all that good stuff. Check out our social media pages. Again, we have a In My Head podcast private group that you can ask to join, where we have open conversations of mental health and well-being, free of judgment. It's just a small community where we can have those conversations. Go to patreon.com/In My Head podcast, where you can become a monthly donor as small as $1 a month, and that 100% of that donation will go to the production of this podcast. You can, if you like CBD products, you can purchase it through this link, and a portion of your sales will go to supporting our podcast. The very last thing, betterhelp.com/In My Head. You get a free week of online therapy, and you can cancel or change your therapist at any time. Thank you so much to all of you for your support. I really, really appreciate it. Honestly, my dream is to grow this podcast with the intention of spending more and more time digging into these topics, researching these topics, and having these guests on, professionals and people sharing their personal stories and experiences, so more people can just feel comfortable getting away from the stigma about talking about mental health. It's to me a very open topic, and I feel very comfortable talking about it openly, and I hope that for all of you, that you can get to a space and surround yourself with people that you trust, and you can feel comfortable openly talking about this. Reach out to us, DM us if you have any suggestions for topics or people you want to have on the podcast, and we're very open to that. So thank you again. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you next episode.